Welcome back. Let's continue on and start building that back end. So the first thing we want to do is we need to install a couple of tools. The most important tool is probably the Serverless Framework. What's the Serverless Framework? The Serverless Framework is a set of libraries that we use in our Node.js application, but it's also a set of tools that allow us to easily deploy these serverless projects into the cloud. One nice thing about the Serverless Framework is it is platform agnostic, meaning that I can, in theory, write some stuff that I could target Google, I could target Azure, or I could target AWS. In my case, I'm going to use that framework to target AWS and do all the work we need to do. So, first things first, let's get those tools set up. The goal here is, I'll just clear my screen here. The goal here is that you want to be able to run serverless and have it installed. So that's goal number one, install the serverless framework. Here you can see the version of serverless that I'm currently running. These things evolve over time. Hopefully, if you follow this, if you follow this series, hopefully it'll all work the way that I do it here. My experience is actually this is pretty solid stuff, so I wouldn't be too worried. I don't think it'll change that much. So we need to install serverless. How do you do that? You go over to, you Google it, of course. You say serverless. Now serverless is an overused term, so let's do serverless framework download. And that actually takes us to exactly the right place. I can see here the AWS Lambda guide installing the serverless framework. So I'm going to click on this link here. And it tells us the shocking news on how to install serverless, which is npm install -g serverless. So nothing too unexpected there. This is how you install serverless. It can be a little tricky because this does depend on some other things. So if it tells you please install Python, then do that too, etc., etc. But usually this goes along pretty smoothly. It just installs. The other thing that's useful in this particular website is it also brings you to instructions for setting up your AWS credentials. That's pretty important, and in fact I need to set mine up again, so I'll go through that process really quick. So once again, this is the serverless framework that we installed, and the serverless framework, when it talks to AWS, it uses, basically it assumes that you have the AWS command line interface installed, right? So there's another tool called it's just called AWS. When you run it from the command line, it's just AWS, that's the command. And as we can see, I do have the AWS command line interface, this version, blah, 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 installed on this system. So how did I get the command line interface? Well, shocking. I Google AWS CLI download. So follow the instructions for downloading and installing the AWS CLI. And if you've done it right, then you too will have an AWS command that you can run. The next step is we want to configure it to talk to our account. So at the moment, I actually have multiple accounts in this system. I'm going to change it to point to my account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the AWS console, and we want to configure our AWS command line to connect to this account. So I've already logged in, so it's just going to let me straight in here. There we go. This is my account, Rob Dev. Great stuff. And I'm going to go, well, actually, I know what we eventually have to do. So let's see what AWS says it needs. I need to do AWS Configure. So this is mostly a one-time command that you use to configure your AWS CLI to talk to your AWS account. If you're switching between accounts, you might need to run this other times. There's also an option for using profiles to switch between accounts, But I'm just going to set my main profile to target my AWS account. So I type this in, and it says, what's your AWS access key? So I've got an AWS account. Let's generate an access key. By the way, the credentials that I'm about to generate, I will mention that I will, right after recording this video, I'm going to do this again and generate new credentials because we don't want anyone using my secret access key, you know, that kind of a thing. So where do we need to go? We need to go into IAM, which is the AWS, what does it stand for? I always have a hard problem with this, Identity and Access Management. It does make total sense. That's where I'm going. AWS IAM. Over here's a little shortcut actually, my security credentials. That's kind of nice. I'm going to go over here. So this is my security credentials for who I'm currently logged in as. And that's good enough for me. So I'm logged in as Rob in my account. And currently I do have an AWS access, I do have an access key. Okay. This was generated a while ago, hasn't been used in months I see, so I am fairly good saying, hey, let's just make that inactive. We're going to deactivate it, and I'm even going to delete it. So we can delete and recreate these things on the fly. Of course, you may not have an access key, so you won't have to do that. I'm going to create a fresh access key. So I'll click here, and I can download this. Actually, I don't really feel like I should download this because I'm going to change it anyways. The most important thing is these two things. So I'm going to grab this access key and I'm going to go back to our command line, and this is the AWS access key ID. Bang. And now this, I'll copy this one and we go back to our command line, and this is the secret. This is the secret. I do like that region, US West 2. That's the region that's closest to me, so I'm going to say yes. I like a default output format of JSON. This doesn't really matter. Great. So what did this do? This configured the AWS CLI to talk to my account. So let's do a little test here. I'm going to go over to S3. And so these are my S3 buckets. So currently I've got 4 buckets. And these are just projects that I've done over the years and stuff. Now we're going to go over here, and if everything is configured correctly, I should be able to list the buckets. So let's try that. AWS S3 LS. Great. So these 4 buckets, when I use the AWS CLI, I can see that I'm talking to my AWS account. And now, because I've configured the AWS CLI to talk to my account, when I'm using the Serverless Framework, it'll also use my AWS account when I deploy this stuff. So that's the important first step. Thank you. Hope you join me in the next one.